What happens when one of Hollywood's most unpredictable actors sits down with a talk show host who thinks she knows everything about everyone? You're about to witness one of the most uncomfortable television moments ever recorded, where professional courtesy goes out the window and true personalities emerge. This isn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This is something much deeper and more revealing about the nature of media manipulation and celebrity culture. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this explosive exchange. The stage was set on what seemed like an ordinary morning on The View. The familiar purple and blue set gleamed under the studio lights, the audience buzzed with anticipation, and the co-hosts sat in their usual positions around the curved desk. Joy Behar, positioned prominently at the center, shuffled through her notes with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. She glanced up at the teleprompter, then down at her prepared questions, a slight smirk playing on her lips. Nicolas Cage entered from stage left, his distinctive walk immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with his film career. He wore a simple black suit, his hair neatly styled, and carried himself with the quiet intensity that had defined his decades in Hollywood. The audience applauded warmly as he made his way to the guest chair, offering a genuine smile and wave to the crowd. "Welcome back to The View, everyone," Joy announced as the applause died down. "We're here with Academy Award winner Nicolas Cage, who's promoting his latest film." "Nicolas, thank you for being with us today." "Thank you for having me, Joy," Nicolas replied, settling into his chair with practiced ease. "It's always interesting to be here." Joy's eyebrow arched slightly at the word interesting, but she pressed on with her first question. "So, Nicolas, your new movie has been getting mixed reviews. Some critics are saying you're just playing yourself again. How do you respond to that criticism?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Nicolas paused, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly. The seasoned actor had faced similar questions countless times, but something in Joy's tone suggested this wasn't going to be a typical softball interview. "Well, Joy," Nicolas began carefully, "I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what acting is. Every performance I give is a conscious choice, a deliberate interpretation of the character as written. If people see similarities between my roles, perhaps that's because I bring honesty and authenticity to each character, not because I'm lazy or playing myself." Joy leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts sensing an opportunity. "But Nicolas, let's be honest here. Your performances over the last decade have been, shall we say, very similar. The wide eyes, the intense stare, the over-the-top delivery. Isn't it fair for critics to point that out?" "I think what you're describing as over-the-top is actually commitment," Nicolas responded, his voice remaining level but with a subtle edge creeping in. "I believe in fully inhabiting a character, in finding their truth even in extreme circumstances. That's not over-the-top, that's dedicated craft." "Dedicated craft," Joy repeated with a barely concealed chuckle. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've found a formula that works and you're sticking to it." "There's nothing wrong with that, Nicolas. But let's call it what it is." The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was supposed to be a light promotional interview, but Joy was clearly in confrontation mode. Nicolas took a deep breath, his hands resting calmly on the arms of his chair. "Joy, I'm curious about something," Nicolas said, his tone shifting to match her energy. "How many films have you made? How many characters have you brought to life? How many times have you stood in front of a camera and tried to find truth in fiction?" "I'm not an actor, Nicolas. I'm a journalist," Joy shot back. "My job is to ask the tough questions that audiences want answered." "Is it?" Nicolas asked, leaning forward now. "Or is your job to create controversy where none exists? To manufacture conflict for the sake of entertainment? Because that's what this feels like right now." The studio audience began to murmur. This was not the direction anyone had expected the interview to take. Joy's smile became more forced, her media training kicking in as she tried to regain control of the situation. "I'm simply asking legitimate questions about your career choices, Nicolas. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine why that is." "I'm not uncomfortable at all," Nicolas replied evenly. "I'm simply wondering why you seem more interested in tearing down my work than actually discussing it. Is this how you approach all your guests, or am I special?" I treat all my guests with the same level of professional scrutiny, Joy said, her voice rising slightly. If you can't handle a few pointed questions about your career, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Nicholas laughed, but there was no humor in it. Professional scrutiny? Is that what you call asking loaded questions designed to make me look foolish? Joy, I've been in this business for over 3 decades. I've worked with some of the most respected directors in cinema history. I've won an Oscar, I've been nominated for numerous other awards, and I've created characters that people remember and quote decades later. What exactly are your qualifications to sit there and judge my work? The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators zoomed in on both faces, capturing every micro-expression. Joy's jaw tightened as she realized her guest was not going to play along with her usual interview style. My qualifications are that I represent the audience, Joy said, her voice becoming sharper. I ask the questions that regular people want answered, and regular people are wondering why you keep making the same face in every movie. The same face? Nicholas repeated, incredulity creeping into his voice. Joy, have you actually watched my films? Have you seen Leaving Las Vegas? Adaptation? Moonstruck? Face Off? Each of those performances required completely different approaches, different physicality, different emotional landscapes. If you think those are all the same face, then you clearly haven't been paying attention. Joy waved her hand dismissively. Oh please, Nicholas. You can list your greatest hits all you want, but your recent work speaks for itself. The ridiculous expressions, the manic energy, it's all very samey. Ridiculous expressions? Nicholas's voice dropped to a dangerously quiet level. Joy, let me ask you something. When you go home at night and look in the mirror, do you ever wonder if you're bringing any value to the world? Do you ever question whether spending your days belittling artists and creators is really the best use of your platform? The studio fell silent. Even the other co-hosts looked stunned. Joy's face flushed red as she processed what had just been said to her on live television. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Joy's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find words. Her usual quick wit seemingly abandoned her in this moment of unexpected personal attack. The camera captured every second of her stunned expression, while Nicholas sat back in his chair with the calm demeanor of someone who had just delivered exactly the message he intended. Excuse me? Joy finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you just question my value to the world? I did, Nicholas replied without hesitation. Because you seem very comfortable questioning mine. I thought perhaps we could have a real conversation instead of this performance you're putting on. Joy's shock quickly transformed into anger. Her face reddened further as she leaned forward, pointing her finger at Nicholas. Performance? I'm doing my job, which is asking celebrities tough questions instead of kissing their asses like every other show does. Tough questions? Nicholas laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. Joy, asking an actor why they act the way they do isn't tough. It's basic. A tough question would be asking me about my process, my inspirations, my craft. What you're doing is playground bullying, dressed up as journalism. Playground bullying? Joy's voice cracked with indignation. I have been a professional broadcaster for longer than some people have been alive. I don't need acting lessons from someone who thinks yelling equals good performance. There it is again, Nicholas said, shaking his head. You keep reducing my work to yelling and making faces. Tell me, Joy, when you watched Leaving Las Vegas, did you think I was just yelling? When you saw me in Adaptation, was I just making faces? Or is it possible that you haven't actually watched my serious work and you're basing your entire critique on internet memes and clips taken out of context? Joy straightened up, trying to regain her composure. I've seen your movies, Nicholas. I've seen enough to form an opinion. Which movies? Nicholas pressed. Name 3 of my films from the last 5 years, and tell me specifically what you didn't like about my performances in them. The challenge hung in the air. Joy looked around the table at her co-hosts, but they were all staring at their notes or looking anywhere but at her. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word of this unexpected confrontation. I don't need to prove my credentials to you, Joy said finally. The point is that critics and audiences have noticed patterns in your work, and as a talk show host, it's my job to address those concerns. Critics and audiences, or just you? Nicholas asked. Because it sounds like you've decided what my career means without actually engaging with the work itself. That's not journalism, Joy. That's lazy commentary. Lazy? Joy's voice rose again. I have been in this business for decades. I have interviewed thousands of celebrities, politicians, and newsmakers. I know how to do my job. Do you? Nicholas asked, his voice remaining frustratingly calm. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've gotten comfortable taking cheap shots at people who can't really fight back. Most actors just smile and nod when hosts attack their work because they don't want to seem difficult. But I'm not most actors. Joy slammed her hand on the desk, causing the water glasses to rattle. I am not attacking you. I am asking legitimate questions about your career choices. By calling my work ridiculous? By suggesting I'm lazy? By implying that I'm just playing myself in every role? Nicholas's voice finally showed some heat. Joy, if someone came into your workplace and said you were just reading words off a teleprompter without any skill or thought, how would you react? That's completely different, Joy protested. I'm not pretending to be someone else for a living. No, you're pretending to be a journalist, Nicholas shot back. But what you're actually doing is entertainment masquerading as news. At least I'm honest about what I do. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. One of them cleared her throat and tried to interject. Maybe we should move on to talking about Nicholas's new film. No, Joy said firmly, not taking her eyes off Nicholas. I want to finish this conversation. Nicholas, you seem to think you're above criticism. I'm absolutely not above criticism, Nicholas replied. I welcome intelligent, thoughtful criticism. What I object to is lazy, surface-level attacks designed to get a reaction. There's a difference between critique and clickbait. Clickbait? Joy's voice reached a new octave. Are you suggesting that I'm some kind of tabloid hack? I'm suggesting that this conversation reveals more about your approach to journalism than it does about my approach to acting, Nicholas said. You came into this interview with a predetermined narrative about who I am and what my work represents, and when I didn't play along, you doubled down instead of actually listening. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks screaming into a camera is high art. And there you go again, Nicholas said, remaining seated and composed. Reducing everything I do to screaming. Joy, I won an Academy Award for a performance where I barely raised my voice above a whisper. I've done intimate character studies, broad comedies, intense dramas, and yes, action films where I brought energy and commitment. But you've decided that it's all the same thing because it's easier than actually analyzing the work. I have analyzed your work, Joy insisted, her voice shaking with anger. And my analysis is that you're a one-trick pony who got lucky early in his career. The words hung in the air like a slap. Nicholas stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Lucky, he repeated slowly. Joy, let me tell you about luck. Luck is being born into a family with connections in the entertainment industry. Luck is getting a talk show job and keeping it for years, without ever having to really challenge yourself or grow. Luck is being able to sit in judgment of people who actually create things while contributing nothing of value yourself. I wasn't lucky, Joy. I worked for everything I have. I studied, I trained, I took risks, I failed, I got back up, and I kept working. What exactly have you built? What have you created? What legacy are you leaving behind besides a trail of uncomfortable interviews and cheap shots at people who were brave enough to put themselves out there? Joy's face went pale, then red again. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Joy stood frozen behind the desk, her face cycling through emotions as she processed Nicholas's devastating words about her legacy. The other co-hosts looked like they were witnessing a car crash in slow motion, unsure whether to intervene or simply hope the cameras would cut away. But Nicholas wasn't finished. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Nicholas continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You have a platform that millions of people watch. You could use that platform to elevate conversations, to explore ideas, to help people understand the world around them, Instead, you use it to tear people down for entertainment. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. It's just sad. Joy's mouth opened and closed several times before she finally found her voice. "How dare you?" she whispered, then louder. "How dare you come on my show and attack me personally?" "Your show?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "I thought this was The View, not the Joy Behar show. And I'm not attacking you personally. I'm responding to your attacks on me with the same energy you brought to this conversation. The difference is, my observations about your work are based on what I'm witnessing right now, not on lazy stereotypes and internet memes." "Get out," Joy said suddenly, her voice shaking. "Just get out of here." Nicholas tilted his head, studying her with genuine curiosity. "You're going to throw me off your show because I won't play along with your predetermined narrative? Because I defended my work and questioned your methods? That's very telling, Joy." "Security," Joy called out, looking toward the edge of the set. "I want him removed." "Joy, wait," one of the other co-hosts finally interjected, reaching across the table. "Let's all just take a breath here." "No," Joy snapped, turning on her colleague. "I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected by some has-been actor who thinks he's better than everyone else." "Has-been?" Nicholas laughed, but this time there was real amusement in it. "Joy, I'm currently starring in a major motion picture that's #1 at the box office. I have 3 more films coming out this year. I'm working with A-list directors and acclaimed writers. Meanwhile, you're sitting behind a desk on daytime television, picking fights with your guests. Which one of us sounds like the has-been?" Joy's face contorted with rage. "I have been a respected voice in media for longer than you've been relevant. I interview world leaders, politicians, newsmakers." "You interview people who need something from you," Nicholas corrected. "Politicians who want votes, authors who want to sell books, actors who want to promote movies. But the moment someone pushes back against your narrative, you can't handle it. You call security instead of engaging with the conversation. That's not the behavior of a confident journalist, Joy. That's the behavior of someone who's never had their ideas actually challenged." "I don't need my ideas challenged by you," Joy shot back. "You're just an actor. You pretend to be other people for money. I deal with real issues, real problems in the real world." "Real issues?" Nicholas stood up now, matching her energy. "Joy, you just spent 10 minutes attacking my career based on surface-level observations and refused to engage when I tried to have an actual discussion about craft and artistry. If this is how you handle real issues, no wonder the world is in the state it's in." "Don't you dare lecture me about the state of the world," Joy seethed. "You live in a Hollywood bubble, completely disconnected from reality. And you live in a media bubble, completely disconnected from the people you claim to represent," Nicholas fired back. "At least I'm honest about what I do. I create entertainment, I tell stories, I try to bring characters to life in ways that might move people or make them think. You pretend to be a voice for the common person while sitting in judgment of everyone who walks through that door." Joy looked around desperately, realizing that security wasn't coming, and her co-hosts were just watching this unfold. "This interview is over," she announced. "Cut to commercial." "Joy," Nicholas said, his voice suddenly gentle. "This could have been a great conversation. I came here prepared to talk about my work, my process, my passion for storytelling. I would have loved to discuss the challenges of bringing complex characters to life, or the evolution of cinema, or what it means to dedicate your life to an art form. Instead, you chose to make this about tearing me down. Why? What do you gain from that?" For a moment, Joy's anger seemed to falter. She looked genuinely confused by the question. That's not. I was just doing my job." "Was it, though?" Nicholas asked. "Or were you performing? Were you putting on a show for your audience, trying to create a viral moment at my expense? Because that's what this feels like. It feels like you decided before I even sat down that this was going to be a confrontation, and you were going to be the one who put the arrogant movie star in his place." "I don't need to explain myself to you," Joy said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "You don't," Nicholas agreed. "But maybe you should explain it to yourself. Maybe you should ask why your first instinct when interviewing an artist is to diminish their work instead of trying to understand it." Maybe you should wonder why you're more interested in creating conflict than fostering genuine conversation. Joy stared at him, and for a moment it seemed like she might actually engage with what he was saying. But then her media training kicked back in, and her expression hardened again. "This is my show," she said firmly, "and I decide how interviews go here. If you don't like my questions, there's the door." Nicholas nodded slowly, as if this response told him everything he needed to know. "There it is," he said quietly. "When challenged to think differently, when asked to examine your own behavior, you fall back on authority and control. You can't defend your approach, so you assert your power instead." He began to remove his microphone. "You know what, Joy? You're right. This is your show. And this conversation is a perfect example of what your show represents. Thank you for making that so clear." As Nicholas stood and walked toward the exit, Joy called after him, "Don't expect to be invited back." He paused at the edge of the set and turned back to her. "Joy, after this conversation, I wouldn't come back if you begged me. But I hope someday you'll watch this back and ask yourself what you could have learned today instead of what you could have won." The studio remained silent as Nicholas disappeared into the wings. Joy stood behind the desk, breathing heavily, looking around at her co-hosts and the audience as if seeing them for the first time. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of her realization that she had just had one of the most uncomfortable exchanges in daytime television history. And that's how one of Hollywood's most unconventional actors managed to completely dismantle a seasoned talk show host using nothing but honest questions and unflinching observations. What started as Joy's attempt to score easy points against a celebrity guest ended with her being exposed as someone more interested in performance than genuine discourse. The real question isn't whether Nicolas Cage was right or wrong in his approach, but whether Joy Behar learned anything from having her methods so thoroughly challenged. What do you think? Did Joy deserve the treatment she received, or did Nicolas go too far? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible celebrity confrontations and behind-the-scenes drama.